But according to authorities, the two have matching tattoos, the word "esh" on their fingers. For many, that was the smoking gun. Tattoos can be coincidence, but same placement, same word, same style, that looked like a connection carved into skin. And when fans put the tattoos side by side with his lyrics, the ones where he referenced secrets, silence, and forbidden love, the outrage boiled over. What once sounded like teenage poetry now felt like a blueprint of something darker. If there was any chance he could salvage his career, it ended the moment that canceled his Seattle show. The timing was too precise. Hours after Celeste's name was revealed publicly, his management pulled the plug on his performance. Fans read it as an admission. Why cancel if you're innocent? Why disappear now unless you know what's coming? Social media exploded with hashtags, Justice for Celeste, Cancel, David Nar Predator exposed. What once were fan pages became archives of evidence. TikTok edits juxtaposed his song lyrics with photos of Celeste. Discord chats turned into forums for speculation. And suddenly the same people who once defended him were calling him finished. And then came the nurse's most haunting detail. She swore that in those last moments Celeste didn't just say David. She tried to say something more. The nurse leaned in, straining to hear her weak voice. Celeste's lips formed the words, "Don't let him," and then nothing. Her breath caught, her pulse faded, and the silence was permanent. The unfinished sentence has haunted everyone who's heard it since. Was she trying to warn them not to let him near her? Was she trying to identify him as the one responsible? Or was it a desperate attempt to tell her family not to let him escape justice? The ambiguity gnawed at the case, but to the public, it didn't matter. They filled in the blank themselves. Commentators online ran with it. What? I made the joke talking about in the back of my car. You, bro, that chai was real, bro. That right in front of us this whole time, bro. This did it, bro. 15 years old, bro. This pushing 30, bro. Creators posted theories stitching together her whispered David, the tattoo, the lyrics, and the canceled show. In the age of social media, perception is reality, and the perception now was that Celeste's last words were her testimony. Her final attempt to identify the person she believed had put her in that hospital bed. By the end of the first wave of coverage, one thing was undeniable. Celeste Rivas's name had become inseparable from David's. Her final moments, as described by the nurse, weren't just a tragedy. They were the spark that turned a beloved artist into the face of one of the most shocking scandals in recent memory. And if Partone proves anything, it's that this was no isolated case of bad luck. It was a storm that had been building for months. In the lyrics, in the screenshots, in the whispers her mother tried to raise, and the world wasn't ready for just how dark Part 2 was about to get the internet trial of David. By the time Celeste's name hit the headlines, the scandal wasn't just about one teenager's tragic death anymore. It had snowballed into a cultural obsession. A story where every lyric, every photograph, and every canceled show became another piece of incriminating evidence. And at the center of it all was the nurse's testimony. She hadn't just said Celeste whispered David. She insisted that Celeste had been conscious long enough to recognize exactly who she was with. To her, this wasn't confusion. This was clarity. A dying girl naming the man she trusted, and perhaps the man she feared. The internet ran with it. To some, this was the final nail in the coffin. To others, it was fuel for conspiracy theories. Because if Celeste was alive when she was brought into the hospital, as the nurse suggested, then what happened between that moment and the official pronouncement of her death? That single gap gave rise to endless speculation. Meanwhile, the receipts kept piling up. Photos of Celeste on FaceTime with David spread like wildfire. Screenshots of Discord conversations emerged where users casually discussed the relationship, some claiming that he had been trying to pay off some people. But the most disturbing part, paying off her friends allegedly so they wouldn't tell on you. Your Discord knowing about all this since 2022. Some saying early 2021 eyes, very, very telling. And fans began combing through his music catalog like detectives combing through crime scene photos. They highlighted lyrics that in hindsight read like confessions. What once sounded like teenage melancholy now felt sinister. And every time someone posted a lyric breakdown, the comment sections filled with people saying the same thing. It was in front of us this whole time. The silence from his camp was deafening. No label statement, no management defense, no carefully worded PR release trying to spin the situation, nothing. That silence only made things worse. In an industry where crisis management is usually rolled out within hours, the lack of response became its own form of confirmation. To fans, it meant there was nothing to defend. To critics, it meant the label was already preparing to cut ties, and the timing couldn't have been more damning. Every day Celeste's name was revealed publicly, his Seattle show was canceled. For his supporters, this was still brushed off as a coincidence. For everyone else, it was confirmation. His career wasn't just under fire. It was over. And then came the rumors, the whispers that took the story from tragedy to nightmare. TikTok creators began speculating that Celeste might have been pregnant. There was no proof, no medical records, no statements from family. But the speculation was enough because in scandals like this, the internet doesn't wait for evidence. It thrives on possibility, and the possibility of a 15-year-old carrying the child of a rising star turned outrage into fury. By now, this wasn't just about David. It was about the larger culture of celebrity. People started asking, why does this keep happening? Why do young stars with fame and money keep being linked to underage girls? The narrative shifted from one singer to an entire industry problem. The nurse's account might be the centerpiece of that narrative. She described how Celeste's hand gripped hers tightly, how her lips formed the words, "Don't let him," before her voice faded forever. To the nurse, those weren't random gasps. They were deliberate, a final attempt at leaving a message. And in the eyes of the public, that message was loud and clear. Celeste was identifying the man who had been with her. It may shock you to learn that the body wasn't even discovered recently. It had been sitting undiscovered for at least 2 weeks. What's trending now isn't his new Musicore sold-out concert. It's hashtags labeling him a predator, a liar, and a murderer. His silence has become part of the narrative. His canceled shows are treated as evidence. His unreleased lyrics are dissected as confessions, and the nurse's testimony has been elevated to gospel. For his fans, the ones who still clung to his innocence, the pressure was unbearable. They posted theories of planted bodies, stolen cars, and elaborate frame jobs. Either he was framed, or my theory is somebody killed someone and stole David's car and left it in the trunk. But those theories couldn't drown out the noise. The outrage was louder, and every hour it only grew. By the end, one thing had become terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just the downfall of an artist. It was the collision of fandom, fame, and tragedy. And the silence of those around him, his label, his management, even other artists suggested they knew something the public didn't. The only question now was whether the truth would ever come out in a courtroom, whether it would remain buried under whispers, tattoos, and unfinished last words. The scandal didn't just stain D4vd's name. It splattered across the entire industry. For weeks, journalists begged for comment from his label. Silence was suffocating. No press releases, no explanations, no carefully managed interviews to control the narrative. In the entertainment business, silence is rarely neutral. It's a strategy. And here, that strategy looked like abandonment. Fans noticed when his face quietly disappeared from festival lineups. They noticed when Spotify playlists began curating around him, leaving his songs off trending lists. The industry wasn't standing behind him. It was quietly shoving him out the door. And still, no one from High Steam dared to speak. If the label stayed silent, the fans did the opposite. They turned into detectives, spending sleepless nights combing through every piece of digital history. They dug up Discord screenshots where people joked about knowing his little girlfriend. They replayed old Instagram lives, scrutinizing his background for clues. They scoured lyrics for hidden meanings. It was a level of fandom dissection that blurred the line between music criticism and criminal investigation. Every lyric became a clue. Every old screenshot became a lead. And the deeper they dug, the darker it got, but not everyone bought it. The He's Framed movement grew louder too. They argued that the timing was too convenient, that someone wanted him out of the picture just as his fame peaked. They pointed to his tour schedule as proof he couldn't have been involved in this version of the story. D4vd wasn't the villain. He was the victim of a setup so elaborate I'd involve stolen cars, planted bodies, and media manipulation. But even within that conspiracy space was a problem, the nurse. Her testimony that Celeste whispered David in her final moments couldn't be explained away by stolen cars or planted evidence. It was too raw, too personal, and it came from a professional with nothing to gain by speaking out. That's why the conspiracy theories always seemed to collapse when the nurse's account was mentioned. You can argue with headlines. You can argue with fan edits. But how do you argue with a dying girl's last words? By this point, mainstream outlets had joined in, framing the scandal